Simon Sinek, find your why. Yes, that's exceedingly important, but we really cannot forget the other person in this equation in the market. They're crucial, unless you're going to go be a hermit or something. So I want to go over something. It's on the same lines. We did What is Business. We talked about not just problem solving, but especially problem creation, and how much thought and effort it takes to create a problem correctly and create the right problems so that then you can solve basically other problems, using the word problem a lot. But at one point in that discussion, very early on, I'd actually written a paper. It should have been entitled The Purpose of Business. If so, I would have like 1,000 sites. Instead, I called it Business from the Internal Point of View, thought I was being all savvy with philosophy and HLA heart, and it gets like 24 views. So title is important, framing is important. And what I said business was producing, if you can read my writing, a good or service for trade. Okay, now I want to be very clear about something as I move on with this. There's this sort of academic game that gets played. Philosophers are very good at it. I know it happens in other places, and that is you'll listen to somebody's talk, you'll read somebody's paper or book or some philosopher or whatever, and then you hone in and you find one mistake with it. You get the person who admits the mistake, and then they're like, see, they're wrong, good night, goodbye. I hate that. It is so unproductive. It is just so twisted. I'm not doing that here, okay? What I want to try and do is build off of some of what has been said. I might not totally agree. It might not totally gel, but I want to try and build off of that, and I want to try and build off of some of the stuff that Rand has written. But once again, it might not be exactly something Rand agreed with, and it might be even me disagreeing with Rand a little bit. But it doesn't mean I think that she's wrong. There's a difference between thinking somebody's wrong or they're incomplete or, whatever. It takes a refined judgment. I implore all of you, when you're reading and listening to people, do that, okay? As an aside, one of the reasons you need to do that, it has been my experience that in a conference that's a week long like this, if you take home, let's say, and this might be a lot, 4 points that you remember and kind of influence you, either in what you do, what you study, or how you read, you're golden. That's a lot of hours to get 4 points. I would be a fool to think that people were interested in every presentation I give, or to think that everybody's going to be interested in every topic that's presented. Your job as a learning human being, and that's going to play a part in value creation as well, you got to listen to it all, because the point that you want, the point that's really going to hit home, could be hiding anywhere, okay? It could even be hiding in writings that you think are wrong, but you stumble across something that's just a terrific insight. So I don't want to be misinterpreted. I can be a bit argumentative, but this is in the spirit of building, not tearing down. I kind of hate that. And so today what I want to talk about kind of goes a little bit beyond this, and it touches on what Richard has said. It touches a lot on what Dr. Hicks and Dr. Salzman, what they've all said. So you heard about producing just earlier. We talked about production. Isabel Patterson, production is profit. I get that. You're bringing something into the world that wasn't there yet. You are creating, right? You're producing. So I kind of get that. And it could be a good or a service, okay? And so it might be something solid that you can touch, or it might be something that you can actually do for other people. Comedy, right? It could be something that's fairly long-lived, like a blast furnace, or it could be something fairly short-lived, like a theatrical performance. Okay, so it could be either of those. I will say, as an aside, one of the things that I find, one of the strengths of Rand's writing is she practices something called bathos. So she'll build up, and then she hits with a downer. I'd have to find some specific examples, but you usually do find them when she's talking about, industrialist X who did X, Y, and Z and produced soap, or produced shaving cream, right? Yeah, they're an industrialist who sold a certain kind of toothbrush. So I really kind of dislike that she downplays soap and shaving cream and toothbrushes and stuff like that, even though her writing style is really effective. So it could be soap, it could be toothbrushes, it could be my beloved soda, or anything like that. Okay, they're products. Okay, and I can understand about that bringing value. I like that, or not that my likes really matter all that much. I think there's something to that. I also think, and this came out of Dr. Biondi's talk earlier, right? So she talks about life makes value possible. And that seems correct. Stones don't have a value. She has a wonderful essay where she talks about if there were an indestructible robot running around the way, it wouldn't have any values because nothing advances its goals, nothing harms its goals. It's just, right? Nothing can take it out of existence, nothing improves its existence. I think there's a few more assumptions there besides indestructible, but yeah, the sort of contingent nature of our existence really does put a point on value. And that's not just Rand. You'll find the Stoics arguing the same sort of thing. So yeah, okay, that's good too. Now's when it starts getting a bit interesting, and this is where so life, but it's your life. Now she says it's your life, basically that. Do you remember the? Because I'm gonna paraphrase, but life makes value possible, but it's your life that. Right, it's a source of happiness to you. So I'm going to. Yeah, well, yeah, your life is a value for you. So the thing with this phrase is, and then I'm going to tell you why I think this is important. It's kind of a little backwards there. But here's the thing with this. Do we mean, like in this conception, it was a possibility of existence or non-existence, sort of a binary yes or no, alive or dead. Or can you be alive or dead? Like a plant, yes. Rock, no. But now when we get down here that your life is a value, and it's very clear in some of the stuff that she's written, especially about there are, when in Atlas Shrugged, when I think it's Dagny, or it could be Dagny or Reardon thinking about the Starnes heirs. Oh, no, it's the sheriff who's telling them about the Starnes heirs. And one of the heirs kills himself. And the sheriff's like, look, far be it from me to say when a person's life no longer has value to them and they feel like it's time to end it. And that feels, as a subtotal of all my subjective judgments, as that feels like Rand, I think that is. So it might come a time when this really doesn't have a value. So when your life is a source of value, happiness, your purpose, that's where virtue comes into play. It's not clear all the time whether this is just being alive or whether it's some richer form of living. And sometimes people, when they're not careful, and I don't think anybody's done it in here, but I have seen it happen, they just kind of conflate the two or ignore the difference. And it is a real difference because your life is a source of your value. probably implies something far more functional here rather than you being in a coma, potentially alive or dead, okay? So that's where things start to get interesting, okay? Because now we're going to start talking about a little bit more about this verb of living, having a rich life, and this concept of value. And I'm going to stop here for a second. The reason this is of fundamental importance, at least in the ways that I kind of want to frame my talks and even part of this week, is if you're in business, you have to offer value. If you do not offer value, you're done. Yet how many people leave business school and don't even know how to portray the value of their own resume? It's astonishing. They don't know how to tell an employer the value they bring. Here's the classes I took, here's the skills I have. Yeah, okay. But none of that tells the employer the value you bring. And there are some books and articles and stuff written on this, right? I'm in no position to judge it. Some say, of course, you're going to list your past achievements, describe them so that the person knows what you did, so they can identify whether you are a value bringer. Others I've seen say that you should actually tell the employer what you can do for them. Forget your past achievements. Here's all the things I can bring to the table and do for you. But your resume is your one-page shot at telling the person who's going to employ you what value you bring. Even more opaque, and just as important, is if you want a loan because you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to tell the bank what value you bring to the table because that's how you're going to repay your loan. And yet, once again, people get neat ideas, and this is where it sounds like I'm being argumentative, and I'm not trying to be necessarily at this point, where there's something that they want to produce, because I've sat in on like these imitation shark games and they're great. Like, this is what I want to produce, but they're only thinking in terms of themselves. The bank doesn't care, or Shark Tank doesn't care, right? Just in that term. And now, this is where you really got to be careful. We don't want to say that there's not value for you, okay? I have some pictures of it. I have designed my office attic, the office that's in the attic of my house, to look like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. I've taken industrial shelving and I've spray painted them to look like rust, a little harder than you think. Give them that sort of pseudo-military feel. I found some Cold War stuff. I have industrial lighting. I actually sold a house and took that lighting with me. The real estate agent thought I was nuts. I'm like, you have no idea how hard this is to get, right? That has great value to me. My wife walks into the attic and is like, oh God, zero value to her, okay? So I don't want to overlook or ignore the possibilities of you making something for yourself and it being of value to you. That's very important. It's your creative ability. It's you creating your life space, your workspace, your desk, the pictures you display, right? They're of value to you. I don't care about your family sitting there. Isn't that cute? No, but it is to you, so that's what's important. Go for it. So that kind of value exists and is important, and I don't want to say that it doesn't. I'm going to put that off to the side, though, because we're going to come back and talk about business. We're going to talk about in existing in the world in this thing called value, okay? Because unless you want to be the beggar of that slide, right, you got to go into the world offering value. And I think, once again, the same as I think if you understand a little bit better about what business is, you might do business better. I think if we start to get a better understanding of what value is, it might help us. I brought this book, right, Ayn Rand, Philosophy, Who Needs It? Now, there's a lot of good stuff in it, but one of the reasons, or one of the things that I took away, is one of the reasons you need philosophy is precisely for this. The things that people think are obvious and assume aren't obvious. You shouldn't assume. And worse, if you start assuming it, you're just going to start uncritically using other people's definitions. And that's where things really spiral out of control. This is why Howard Rourke's a hero in The Fountainhead. Rourke doesn't take what everybody else thinks a building should be. Rourke creates what buildings should be, and he knows, and it's inside of him. Peter Keating, on the other hand, who's the ne'er-do-well of the book, you kind of feel a little sorry for him. He takes his concepts of building from everybody else, uncritically, whatever that is, right? And so we don't want to do that. We want to use philosophy to try and get a good understanding for ourselves, because as we have seen, bringing value into the market, yeah, you were talking about the iPencil examples, right? About if you want to serve food, you have to have the dishes, you have to have the spices, you have to have the trucks to get the yada. You need everything, right? There's more values than I can identify. You have to figure out where you fit in that. And if you don't take the time to do it, you're going to be miserable, okay? So that's why I think this is important. I think this is important for earning your daily bread. I think it's important for business. And I also think it's important because I'm just not completely satisfied with everything that's going on with this. Okay, so there's a lot of points I want to cover, and like I said, one of the reasons this is a bit rough, I'm not sure what order I want to go in. I'll say the following about value. It's not going to happen a little bit. Doesn't mean Rand's wrong, but we do have to, she recognizes it, but doesn't completely, that there is objective value in the world. I'm not denying that. That's absolutely true. If you think drinking arsenic is good for you, well, you'll find out very quickly otherwise, right? We're not going to change that. If you think that putting your finger in in the socket is a value to you, you're going to find out otherwise quickly, right? There are objective things in this world that aren't of value to you, no matter what you believe. I think that's fair. On the other hand, there are a lot of things in the world that are of value to you only if you think they are. She actually, and I forget what essay it's in, or it might even be one of her fiction novels, one of you might be able to tell me that, but she talks about the pleasure of lipstick.
What is capitalism? That's the little stenographer.
Yeah. And to her, it is important. But that's totally, in a sense, totally her. It's cultural too. But I mean, to me, it's not. To Eddie Izzard, it might be. Or at one time, Eddie Izzard was a cross-dressing comedian. He's really good if you haven't heard him, right? That's a humor that people purchase, right? Very subjective. And if, I go to some very awful comedy shows where I really don't like what these people are calling humor, but the audience is laughing. Okay, well, to them it's funny. To me, it's not. To me, it's just like so obvious and dumb. So there's a very subjective element to this, but you have to be careful, because when you say that, people like to go all or nothing on you and say, oh, you think it's all subjective, blah, blah. No, I didn't say that. It's subjective with pretty hard parameters in a lot of cases, right? Once again, you don't want to be mixing your lipstick with really harmful chemicals, because then, we're back to no, that's not a value for you, even if you believe it is. Okay, so it's this kind of subjective nature of value that just it's interesting. I don't want to say it's mystic, but there's something about it, because what ends up happening, and you might want to call it market value if you want. I don't mind that. There's a term I've been exploring, and I want to leave these up because I want to use some pictures, so I might have to erase some of this if I can find said eraser. Yay, here it is. That and I don't know if this is exactly the right term. I've come across this in education. Sort of, that's a Y. Intersubjectivity. And as far as I can make out this term as it's used, and I forget the education theorist who uses it right now. It flies out of my head. But as far as I can tell about this, what it kind of means is sort of, in one sense, an intelligibility. In Hume talks, David Hume, the philosopher David Hume actually talks, I think, a lot about this as well. And that is, I can have some subjective ideas that are just so, you really aren't going to understand what they are. Or you're not going to know, not close enough to what they are, right? They could just be my own wild, fanciful thoughts, the things I don't share with people, maybe. Or if I picture, we make up some imaginary creature, the fragon, right? Not the dragon, but the fragon. I might have a picture of my head that you have a totally different picture of your head. I have no idea, right? Now, if we both draw the picture and we both can understand, then we might have this intelligibility, right? But it's something like a meeting of the minds. Language is like this. Okay, and Stephen talked about language. There he is. Stephen talked about language and grammar. I mean, I think one of the things in all the politicization of the campus and everything else, and of a whole host of things about inclusiveness and not inclusiveness, what gets lost in the conversation is look, language is for communication. And communication's exceptionally tough because the picture in my head is not the picture in your head. That's the task of writing anything. And it is so unbelievably difficult because to you, in your head and in your theater, it's obvious. Now try to make it obvious to somebody else. Really sit down and try to explain it and write it out. Oh my God, that's hard. Whether it's on your resume, whether it's a novel, whether it's a product description, whatever the case may be, what you were trying to do is make what's inside of your subjective head intelligible to others. So this intersubjective, this intelligibility, at least I understand what it is. I might not agree with it, but I'm trying to communicate something with you. And that's what language is. And that's why we have rules of grammar too. Right? Because our grammar helps us with meanings. Helps us define what meanings are. Give me one word. I'll challenge you on this. I can give you a couple minutes even. Give me one word out of the Oxford English Dictionary that has only one definition. I knew of one. Me and Steve Scheinberg found it. Only one that I ever found. I was reading Sidgwick's Method of Ethics, and he talks about psychogenesis in a chapter. And I was reading this for grad school with a friend of mine, and we were both like, what the hell is psychogenesis? We went, our library had an abridged copy of the OED, but it was still huge. It stacked up to like this. We go, we find psychogenesis. And what does it say? See Sidgwick, Methods of Ethics. And that was it. Yeah. And I was like, no. The word go at one time held the record for the most definitions, and I think it was like at 23. If you went down all of them. 23 variations of the meaning of go. So it's quite possible if we both just said go, we're talking about entirely different things. Because subjectively, the meaning that we're holding when we say that might be entirely different than somebody else's. There's a philosophical problem. And this kind of hit me. I wish it would have hit me in grad school. This philosopher says you are in a remote area and you come across some peoples, a tribe that nobody's encountered before, and they speak this language that nobody knows. And one of these people points at what you might call a rabbit and says the word gavagai. And now our philosophical author wants us to say, or asks us, how do you know they really meant rabbit? How do you know they didn't mean undetached rabbit parts? How do you know they didn't mean mammal with big ears? Like all these definitions. As an aside, I remember writing about this in grad school. I had a guy named Peter, I can't remember, he was a student of Wittgenstein's. And he asked us this question, and I basically wrote back that it's not a problem because we talk it out. And I was right. Because what this philosopher proposes is a unique problem with some unknown tribe in a remote area isn't an unknown problem with an unknown tribe. It's the problem we encounter every day speaking our own language, because every word we use has that many definitions. Now, how do I zero in on which one you're using? We talk it out. But we have rules for doing that. We have grammar, we have exchange, we have logic, we have reason, we have methods, all the stuff that the epistemology that Stephen went over, so that we can get on the same page and understand what each other means. That's one of the hard things, by the way, of learning a foreign language, isn't it? Like, you can learn the words, but the phrases. So I learned some Hungarian, enough to get by when I lived there in 96, 97. And yo means good, and szerencse is luck. Word order doesn't matter. You have to put a T on the direct object. So yo szerencsét is, or should be, good luck. It's not. I'm forgetting what you say for good luck right now, but the first time I said yo szerencsét to someone, they went, bah! And it turns out that that's what you used to say to the miners as they went into the mine, so you hoped the mine didn't cave in on their head. It was a very dark thing. I hope it was basically the equivalent of I hope you don't die. There's a different way to say what we mean by good luck, right? You don't know that until you talk it out with somebody. It's impossible. The definition, the words themselves aren't going to sort themselves out. So you need this inner subjectivity. How does that relate at all to business, Bill? What the hell are you talking about? Well, I think, and I would like to argue that in a way, and in a very important way, and in a way the Supreme Court should recognize, that's what prices are. That's what one of the things that a price system does, right? A Soviet system can produce stuff, crappy stuff, awful stuff, stuff that falls apart and is almost immediate junk, but you know what? It kept some people from dying. When the wall came down in 90, it wasn't like there was nobody left in Moscow. They were miserable. They were really poor, but they had stuff. But why is it that they had such craptastic stuff and the West had such great consumer stuff? We had a method of communicating value to one another. We had a method of communicating, like language, of what's important to us and what's not important to us. And more, and just as importantly, so there was a system that allowed that to happen intersubjectively between us, and that's markets. Right? So the 23 meanings of go aren't meanings that I invented. They're somehow meanings that we all somehow agree on, or enough of us agree on so that we can communicate, right? It's a very, I find it intriguing process. And it's the same with prices. Like, all of our decisions go into the making of prices, right? And supply and demand, that's what it is. I would disagree with microeconomics because it assumes that there's one market. I don't think there is, because the one market tends towards one price. And as you know by now, I am a fan of Diet Coke, and I can pretty much tell you the different prices it is in different places in Springfield and in different stores in Springfield. That might be a thing of supply and demand. That might also be a thing of business models. That might be also costs that right? So I don't want to assume that there's just one market and that everybody's decision in Diet Coke, like in Indonesia, somehow affects my price of Diet Coke. But in a market system, enough people get to chime in at whatever the scope or catchment area of the market is, to throw price signals out there. If the Diet Coke disappears, they're probably charging too little. If they don't sell any, they're probably charging too much, right? Businesses are communicating with people like that, and you're communicating back with them. It's a very important form. It's a very abstract way. It's a very sort of, in some ways, I'm not going to write A Tale of Two Cities like that. And yet, it's like a lowest common denominator that we can all use so that we can put all this myriad of stuff that we talked about in some kind of order, right? So that we can see the demand of wheelbarrows and the demand of Diet Coke and the supply of what goes into that, et cetera, the whole way down. So it's this communication that signals both to producers and suppliers and consumers some very important things about the state of your good in the market. Rodrigo, I'm sorry, you're stretching, right? What has happened to Diet Coke in Guatemala?
It's become discontinued.
It has become discontinued. And why do you think that might be?
Same in Brazil.
Same in Brazil? It's a plague, folks. It's like the killer bees. Why? Why do you think it was discontinued? If you were Coke Enterprises, Guatemala, why would you discontinue Diet Coke?
Saw more Coke Zero than Diet Coke. More people consuming Coke Zero.
Right. You either it came to a point where so few people were buying it, you can't drop the price anymore because you'd be selling it at a loss, or I like the way you said it. Here's all the resources I'm going to invest in Diet Coke. What's my return going to be? Here's the same resources I could in Coke Zero. Wow, look what my return could be. Goodbye, Diet Coke. Turns out that's also serving more people, making more people happy, delivering more value to the market, all that sort of good stuff. Brazil, too. Anyway, okay, so, and that happens, right? It's not enough of a value to produce en masse anymore. I'm going to need to find the formula for this if this happens in the United States. I need my aspartame.
In Diet Coke.
Oh my God.
The price will go way up.
I'll be the real McCoy of Diet Coke. The untouchables will take on a whole different... Yeah, Dr. Kline made his fortune smuggling Diet Coke into the States. Yep. Brought it in from Canada over Lake Michigan. Okay, so prices communicate all this kind of stuff, but it really is our subjective valuations, and they're all over the board. Okay, and that's the part, right, that now it gets interesting in this sort of communicative space, okay? I had something else here, but I'm gonna leave it for a little bit longer. And I want to go one step further now with this. The philosopher David Hume writes about it. Of course, Adam Smith writes about it, and we talk about it. And we talk about trade, which is a key part of it all. Business doesn't exist without trade, because it's through trade we get prices. Right? No trade, no business. Your whole thing is based on trade. And you have to realize, and I'm going to bring this out in the next conference, like gangbusters. That's all based on voluntary choice. You have to convince people. Again, back to your resume. You can't bring out what's in your head in a way that somebody else can understand and be like, yeah, you lose. Okay? So when you're putting your product to market now, this is where it gets kind of sketchy. Because in the quote that Dr. Salzman used, and I love that quote, but it also gives me the heebie-jeebies where Reardon's like, I'm bringing my best to the market, or the best to the market against your best. And it's like, sometimes. Or maybe it's going to depend on how we define best, right? Because it might be, I know that the best thing is actually cost prohibitive. So I'm actually bringing to you a product that probably could be better in some maybe objective sense, operate better, last longer, whatever else. But that's just not cost effective. I can't deliver to you the indestructible car. It's just too expensive. I want to give you a car, they call it planned obsolescence, but it's just because my engineering is so good. I know how long the engine's going to last. Right? So I'm bringing to you a car that probably lasts for 250, 300,000 miles, which was by far better than cars that were made in 1970. I don't care what anybody says. You look at the engineering statistics, we make much better cars today. They last longer, they function better, and all that. Okay? So, I can get lost in my own thought. Best for best. What I'm bringing to you is something you're willing to buy. I feel the ice cracking, right? This is one of those annoying things about capitalism. It's great and yet annoying. But I think it's true, objectively true about the system. You're sitting on the airplane going, it would be much more comfortable and pleasant if X, Y, and Z. I'd really like this more. That's not the company's job. The company's job is to deliver you enough so that you find a value your ticket that you bought. And to annoy you just up to the point where you wouldn't buy. Right? And they're always experimenting with that. If they annoy you a little too much, you don't buy, and they're like, oh shit, we'll have a sale, whatever. But that's it, because everything else costs. There's a famous case, if you read about Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines was very focused, I think it still is, but especially in its growth days and its early days, Southwest Airlines was focused on delivering cheap, affordable flights in the South. And nobody thought it was possible. Right? They had a very small fleet of planes. They were always being used. And somebody comes up in one of these meetings and goes, we should serve these great meals. It would make the flight so much better. People would enjoy it, blah, de, blah. And the owner shoots it down, and rather harshly. Not this, that's a good idea, but here's the right answer. Boom. Does that help the passenger get from point A to point B? No. Done. Out. That's what we're about. If it gets the passenger there faster or cheaper or something else, but we're about getting from point A to point B, right? Now, we're not a cargo plane. We're not going to put people in with livestock and stuff like that. But that's pretty much it. It's just this focus. So once again, it's this intersubjective dance, right? What would the best flight be? That's not really the point. And the point is what's the flight you'll buy? And not just you, but enough people to make the flights possible so that they don't discontinue the flights in places like Guatemala or Brazil. I'm not talking metaphorically about Diet Coke at all. Yes.
But I know you were prodding the concept of the best here.
Yep.
Right there. Because different consumers in their context will talk about the best, so I might be willing to tolerate a lot of discomfort because I want to be more frugal with my money and I really do care about getting A to point B, and I don't need fully reclining business class or whatever. I don't give a flying hootenanny, to be polite, about certain types of things, whereas other people in the context of their lives what I would regard as a luxury, that's really important to them.
Yep.
They'd be willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
That's not the best for
Yep.
for my context. That's the best for their context.
Yep.
And different businesses will cater to those market niches because they know there are different. The audience, there's never the audience. The audience isn't the whole world. You have micro audiences. And if you can deliver products for any one of them profitably, that's the best that you're bringing for what people are looking for as their best product, right? So I'm a little worried that you're
I get it.
harsh on the word of the best because that makes it sound like there's a platonic form of the best when I know clearly you don't think so, and I don't think Rand thinks so either.
No, but what I think when reading Rand, like Atlas Shrugged, it just so happens that Reardon Metal is the best engineered product and at the best price. Right? Now, there does come a time later in the book when everything's going to hell that steel is the best that you can use, and in a meaningful sense, the best. But I think that kind of gets overlooked. The best in terms of trade is going to be this trade-off between what I can deliver to you profitably versus some sort of more ideal. Now, it doesn't even have to be a platonic form, right? I can say leather seats in first class, and that's, people will be like, oh yeah, that's more luxury, but the airline's not going to do it unless, you're really, unless people are really willing to shell out. So it's whatever the best isn't going to be a total objective function of the good itself. It's going to be an interplay between what you want, and it's also going to be an interplay between what can profitably be supplied. So it's a much more complex notion of best. And Stephen.
Bernard, I have a T-shirt given to me by my daughter.
Yeah.
As it was Father's Day gift. Best dad in the world.
Yes, I believe it.
That's true. Now, thousands of these are sold right every corner. While I ran into another guy who's also got Best Dad in the World T-shirt.
Liar!
That's also absolutely true. It can be absolutely true because I think this is part of what you're trying to get to. All of these things are individualized to the relationship.
Yeah, and see, that's the kind of, we...
The footnote is to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Best father in the world. To me. That's right. That's the mark on the language. Yeah, one mark. Yeah. It's good.
You're the best father in the world to me. You're my fantasy. No, I'm sorry. You're my reality. Anyway, we'll edit that out. But see, that's kind of what intrigues me about this, is it's a constant dance between kind of like what I want in my specific circumstances and maybe what I deem best and what I deem value, and this interplay that it doesn't happen in isolation. It happens actually in the context, at least in the market, of what everybody else wants. So, anybody watch the TV show Firefly? I figured. Yeah. They should have called it like Space Wars or something. It would have survived. Once again, horrible name, because I remember when the show was actually first run, and I'm like, Firefly, what a... I don't want to watch anything about bugs. Space Cowboys would have been great, right? I think Firefly was like the greatest show on earth, and they ended it after the first season. Written by Josh Whedon. Yeah, same guy with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Joss Whedon, thank you. Sorry, Joss. Yes. So, as often happens, I like something and then people discontinue it. But so it's this dance that I find exceptionally interesting. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about it because once again, we're talking about business, we're talking about our own lives. I think it can lead people down sort of misguided roads in maybe their judgments about capitalism, maybe in their judgments about what constitutes a good business. So I want to show you something, right? like a Venn diagram, this is related. I wish I had a tighter fit to it, but I want to show you something here. If I can get back up on screen. Room PC. Excellent. So once again, so we have this building here. That's a really nice building. I think so. Really nice house. Really nice house. Very nice. So it's $137,000. Wow. Yeah. And then I have this house. But it's a row house. It's not a bad house. $1,525,000. Why does it figure?
Oh, okay, well, all kinds of reasons, apart from the fact that that's in New York City and there's zoning regulations and rent control,
Okay, that'll shortage the supply on us.
state prices because of population density and people, everybody wants to live there.
There we go.
You're the big apple, if you can't make it there, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, so you're
Thank you, Frank.
sorry. Okay.
No, I love it. I'll mix in the song lyrics. Go for it. But no, that's so when we talk about when not we, and I don't think it's happened in this conference, but it happens all the times when people talk about it. When people talk about valuable things, they tend to talk about the things. Well, that's a house. That's valuable. That's no. Or within, this is $137,000 because it's in Cairo, Illinois. Has anybody ever been to Cairo, Illinois? No. Cairo, Illinois is pretty much an abandoned town at the very southern tip of Illinois where the Illinois River meets, or is it the Ohio meets the Mississippi? You would suspect that that would be booming. At one time it kind of was. But Cairo, Illinois, like serious abandoned, like hospital, bye. They left the beds and they left the stuff. It's probably been vandalized now, but you can go, like if you do urban explorers and kind of stuff, you can look up Cairo, Illinois. It's pretty much an abandoned town. There's no demand. Nobody wants it. It's hard to sell it. So it's not the bricks and mortar, it's the value, or if you want to call it market value. I shy away from that because then maybe we get in, it sounds like this economics debate between use value and market value, and I don't quite want to go there. Right? The house is certainly valuable to the people who live in it. I want to acknowledge that. But beyond that, when we commonly talk about what's the value of your house, it's what can you sell it for? And that's going to depend on how many people want it. So the number of people that are going to want this house, which I promise you, if that was in New York, what, 8 million? Easy.
Yeah. It's in Manhattan, absolutely.
Right? Versus, that's why you have that for 1.5 million. Okay? And they can sell it for that because, once again, that's what people are going to want. I want to go one step further. Okay? And because I think it's right on what people want. But once again, tying into networks of value and creating value, right? What's the real estate slogan when you're buying a business? What are the 3 things that matter? Anybody ever hear this?
Could you repeat the question?
It's a real estate question. What are the 3 things that matter in buying real estate?
Price.
Location.
Good. No, there we go, all 3. I'm not saying that those don't matter, but the saying is location, location, location. Okay. Why? Because you need your business, if you're going to have a brick and mortar, to be in an economically viable area. Okay? You need it to be in a place where there is demand. You need it to be in an economically vibrant place for your business. So I often show this picture to my students. I don't know if you can see this. I want to ask you a question about this, right? Because trust me, we're still on the same topic. What, and I want you to answer, what do you find scariest about this picture? Like when you look at it, what gives you like the, oh, I'm in the bad, I don't want to be here. Come on, Bodie. What about the building?
It's not been painted.
It's unpainted.
Looks like no one lives there. If they do, it's not somewhere they've been bought or squatting or something.
Okay. Huh? The what? Oh, it's a pretty old building. Yes. I'm sorry. I should have one of those horns. Like, it's an older building. Okay. Yeah. Because those can get kind of run down. Cars up on blocks, literally. Somebody needed a tire. It's gone. Anything else?
Is that a hobo living in the abandoned lot? It looks like I believe I'm seeing things, but it almost looked like there was a...
There are these houses back here that look like something out of The Wire.
Like boarded up. But
What,
I
you mean
thought
like
there
here?
was like a tent in the... Maybe there was... It looked like there's like...
If there was, I'll take that. A hobo living right off the road, like something out of Three Billy Goats Gruff.
It just looked like a little squatter tent, but it could be a shadow.
Okay, it could be. Might not be, but I promise you if you were walking along the road, you wouldn't take the chance. That would make you turn around.
Especially because there are no people.
And there are no people. We'll come back to that. No, it is not. Because there's something weird about this that scares the hell out of me. And once you realize it, it's everywhere where you might want to be careful. This is the Hill District in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Property value is not quite New York, but I promise you to buy in Pittsburgh, right? If we go to the map, let's go to this. Let's go to maps. And we'll go here. And we're going to go Pittsburgh, go Steelers. Okay, so this is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This right here is called The Point. That's a park. This is downtown Pittsburgh, like where you see the skyscrapers and stuff. Strip district, all this, right? You want to buy a house in this part of Pittsburgh, right? There are other parts we can talk about. But you're gonna pay a pretty penny for $300,000-$400,000 easy, right? For some of the stuff that we saw, like that house in Cairo, maybe $1 million. Okay? What we looked at here is somewhere right in here. Somewhere right in the middle of Pittsburgh. Good Lord. And what we find is this. It's not the hobo. We're talking a city where property prices are pretty serious. And this is grass. Where you see grass, you see economic death. Grass is about the lowest value anything could be put to. And in fact, this isn't even grass, it's weeds and brambles. That means this is economically dead. There is no economic activity here probably whatsoever. Well, maybe stuff we don't talk about in this house. I don't know, right? But that's certainly not a lot of clientele, not enough to open a Starbucks or anything, right? It's grass. Grass is worrisome because grass means there's no economic value, right? I'm not saying it couldn't have value for like the wildlife or something that might live in there, okay. But I'm talking about value for us. When we're looking for value, we want to provide value. We want to get back into this intersubjective, I don't want to say melee, but it's interactions where we're trading value for value. And it's quite easy actually to step outside that system. Yes.
I want to quibble a bit.
Quibble.
It's important that you said that's like, it's worse than grass, it's like brambles and stuff, and it does look like it's dead. Because there are people who pay a lot of money to live in the green spaces because they want nice parks to take their kids to. And if they don't see grass, if it's too much of an urban jungle, they won't pay to live there because there are not nice recreational grassy areas to go to. That's weeds out grass, that's weeds and brambles. So I think that's a big difference. It could be that, there's a correlation between grass and not economic value, but I think it depends on what kind of cultivated grass and the safety and all that. Because some people, parks are desirable.
Parks are desirable. You are correct. Parks can add value to surrounding properties. That's true. But I will further advance. This is Detroit by air. When I first started doing this 15 years ago, literally this picture, this was all gray. Because what happened in Detroit at one point, Detroit, Motown, Motor City, Detroit wanted to be greater and bigger and more valuable. And Detroit said, well, how are we going to do that? We're going to have more big industries, more cars, more manufacturers, whatever. So they actually eminent domained huge swaths of land and bulldozed it. And then went to the car, Chevy, Ford, whatever, and said, hey, come here, we got plenty of space to build it. And literally, Ford and the big motor company said, are you high? Are you nuts? Why would we locate there? There's nothing there. There's no place to go to the movies. There's no shops to go to. There's no economic vibrancy, and they never moved. So here we have land outside. Now that's downtown. Look at that. You typically will see shots of Detroit taken from the Windsor River, and they're always an upshot. And you'll catch those like blue skyscrapers. Seriously, Google Detroit, you'll get that. And you'll be like, wow. And you don't realize that like 10 blocks behind it is this. And it's nothing. In fact, it's reached the point where Detroit is issuing fines because people are raising goats within city limits. It's a city, right? And the highest the highest value that they can put the land to is farming. Don't get me wrong, farming can be very valuable, but certainly not on half-block plots. Okay? Why? It's what it can be traded for. Right? So what's going to determine this value is what can I trade it for? Right? If I can't trade it, it might have some sort of physical existence. It might have some sort of objective existence. It might have all the properties one would want in something. But if it's not something that can be traded, it's going to have next to no value. It'll have maybe a personal use value, but that's about it. By the way, and this is why I like thinking through these things, and I want to come back to something Richard said. Maybe this ties in a little to what Richard said, right? Because Smith talks about tapping into the division of labor, and Smith says, look, when I do the division of labor, I can make like 10,000 pins instead of like 500, right? But the only way that that's valuable for me to do is if I can sell the 10,000 pins. If not, I'm just sitting on a lot of pins, and that's painful. Okay? So I have to be able to tap, so that excess, when we're talking about owners, or we're talking about managers, right? What people don't realize is me working by myself, I'm X productive, right? But if I can get coordinated with a bunch of people, then my productivity just explodes. But it ain't easy to get into that mix, to get that coordination, to get us all put together. So who puts us together? Well, managers, financiers, or whatever else. So me managing my own life and maybe fixing my own home, I get my own personal value. But if I can put a team together that does 20 houses in the same time it takes me to do one, I've actually brought into existence a lot of value. I'm not stealing somebody's value. I get to pay them more because they do it more efficiently. They get more because I'm organizing them, right? So I've tapped into this sort of, once again, what people are willing to trade for, sort of this economic vibrancy notion of value. And so that's kind of, when I started at 3:30, right? Okay, good. So I still have a little bit of time here. That's kind of one of the things that I want to make that I find neat about value. There's definitely a notion of value to me, right? Anybody go to garage sales or flea markets? I love doing that. And one of the reasons it can be really fun is because you can go and find something that's of no value to somebody else, and you bought something for a couple bucks that you really think is great. I have a steel, an old steel, it's in my post-apocalyptic office, but it's an old steel interoffice intercom. And the thing is just, I mean, it's a solid hunk, but it's painted the perfect dark green. And it's got, and it was like $1.50. In fact, the guy initially, when I said, ooh, and he was like, really? He's like, $1.50. I'm like, yeah. And I was so happy, and they're like, freak. So it's that kind of interplay I find interesting. It's that kind of interplay that I find that people can ignore. Good story on this. You can even read about. How many people know what the Segway is? Segway? Do you know the two-wheel thing with a handle that you can ride on? You know the two-wheel? Paul Blart, Mall Cop. Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty neat invention. If you read about, right, market success or market flop? Flop. But the person who built it was just like, they were in love with it. They thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And then they would invite people, I think it might have been Steve Jobs or something like that. They invited a couple people, and they looked at this and they said, how neat. They loved it. And people did, like individuals who went, and the owner or inventor had a habit of inviting people he thought would like it, loved it. And so convinced himself that this was going to be universally adopted, this was going to be great. The people who saw it got sucked into the same vortex, like it was so great to them. Of course this is going to be a success. They really didn't think about what I'm talking about here is the other. Or harking back to what I said, what problem does this solve? And in fact, this is a perfect case where the item itself created more problems than it solved. The problem it was meant to solve was walking. Okay, but where do I store it? How do I take it into the office?
It's like, so many problems. They didn't do proper market research.
They didn't do any.
Okay.
Because they were so in love with it.
Highly selective marketing
Yes.
of the 5 potential angel investors.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it turned out that they produced something. Now, it didn't have zero value because it's still used in some places.
Washington, D.C., and you can rent them at the mall.
Right.
Go around, and like 6 people who pay to rent them.
And one person laughed when I said Paul Blart, Mall Cop, because he actually does ride a Segway. So there's a humor value to Segways. You can rent them at some touristy spots. You can watch George Bush fall off of one. I don't know, whatever your flavors are. But that's kind of why I want to bring this up, I guess, and I'll kind of end with this, is your life, right, of course, but when it comes to some more, and it could be securities too. Dr. Salzman could correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons you do not want to buy an illiquid stock is because you can't sell it.
The price might not be.
That's exactly it. The price might be accurate because there's not enough of this interaction to figure out what the hell the inner subjective value of this thing is, right? And so that's kind of one of the things that, and I don't think this is contrary to Rand, because I think The whole point of objectivism is recognizing reality for what it is. And what I'm positing to you is that the market reality and the business reality is this complex relationship between what you find of value, your purpose, what you want to bring to value, while not forgetting that it's other people's values. Those other values are not obvious. You have to figure out what they are, and they can change, right? And that this thing called trade, it deserves a little bit more investigation, because trade brings about value. Like, there's this game called the trading game. How many of you, anybody play the trading game? It's called a trading game. And basically in the game, you're trading candy, right? And so you start off with an initial distribution of candy. People kind of value how happy they are, and then you let them trade, and then all of a sudden people report back that they're much more happier because the people who liked Reese's got Reese's, the people who were allergic to peanuts got rid of them, right? The one person in the world that likes malted milk duds got them. The candy corn just went wherever, right? The things that were in existence didn't change. But because the people who wanted them got them, right, and the people who didn't were able to offload them, wealth actually increased. Value increased. People were wealthier. And the only thing that that happened in that is that people were able to trade. So trade itself, in addition to producing, because things have to be produced. It's not like we had ghost runners on Third, right? We actually had real, if you never grew up in a neighborhood with like 3 kids, you don't understand that, because you couldn't play baseball unless you had ghost runners. So you have to have real things, but once you have real things, just the sheer fact of this dance of people finding what they want, and not just one or two, but enough people to make it like a liquid market, just like you find in financial markets, that itself creates value. And that's a kind of amazing thing to think about, right? So now when you think about things like, and maybe this is kind of like, when you take marketing in the business school, okay, you're learning like your A/B testing, you're learning maybe how to reach different generations. You're like, why are you doing all that? Well, I want to sell stuff. Yeah, but tap it into this, is I want to really find out either the value of it, or I want to actually help give it value, so because more people want it, right? I want to actually generate value by figuring out whether people want it, creating markets, finding that vibrancy so that the people who actually want it can get it, sort of thing. Once again, this is only an intuition and only a hunch, but I do think a lot of times people learn their business skills and then are never given the opportunity to explore how that fits into the larger picture of productivity, profitability, and value creation. Okay? So that's kind of why whatever you're doing within the business, maybe start looking about how it fits into this value proposition, how it creates value, how others might value it. And if nothing else, like I said before, your resume is not just a summary of what you've done. That's your value proposition. And the value proposition, you're worth what others will pay you. That's what pisses everybody off about the market, because we all think that we're worth more. Every single individual thinks, I'm not paid enough, right? The market says otherwise. The market says you're paid exactly what you're worth. Oh, that's some hard medicine, right? So anyway, I just kind of, once again, a framing issue, something to think about. It's philosophy, and hopefully you get those mental juices going, you can do a little bit better, I think.
Well, to bring it back to, because there are a number of people who, whatever areas they want to go into is, whatever their age is, whether they're pivoting to something, or they're embarking on a new endeavor post-college. You started out talking about so many people don't know as job applicants how to pitch themselves. And you don't want to pitch yourself as a braggadocio who, look at all the education I got, because people typically won't care.
No, they don't.
Unless it's a status good, like, oh, you went to Yale, what does that signal to me? Does it signal anything interesting for what I'm interested in? But it might signal something for other people. But generally, so what very practical suggestions could you give people?
There's one I have. Okay. One super.
Show other people what value they can generate for their potential.
I have one. Now, it's not for your first job necessarily, although it could. But if you are into your career a little bit, it could even be a few years. There is no better way to get a raise and no better way to get left behind if you don't do it than to get a competing offer. A competing offer shows that others are willing to buy what you have to offer at a better price. And employers respond to that. Employers also respond to if you never go back onto the market again because they don't have to buy you again. Your value, if they think nobody else is going to buy you, your value has gone the way of those houses in the grass that I've shown you, right? You're worth of some value. You're doing something there. But if you really want to show, this is across the board, competing offers show that others are willing to buy you. It taps you into that economic vibrancy, and either you'll take the other job or you have a good chance, it's always probabilities, of getting a raise from your current job. Just asking for a raise.
Okay, that pushes it back to the next level. How do you get that competitive, competing job offer?
You have to go on and get it. You have to find it. Everything that Stephen talked about, like discovering knowledge in the world, everything that we talked about, epistemology, yeah, that's what and what you talked about, you have to figure out what in the world you want to do. There's a million jobs out there. Which ones are you going to apply for? That takes work. Looking after your own career takes work. It's not obvious. It's not going to fall into your lap. You have to figure out what you want to do. Are you happy with what you're doing? Do you want to do something else? Where are the jobs? Where am I willing to move to? Because it has to be credible. If it's not credible, like, oh, I got an offer in Sri Lanka. Are you willing to move to Sri Lanka? No, bye, get out. Seriously, it has to be a credible offer.
All right, well, that's interesting. And I'm not disagreeing that this is like one of the most effective ways you can.
At least that I've seen.
I actually thought your answer was going to be based on your presentation yesterday. Identify a problem the place you work for hasn't yet solved. Point out how you can address the pain points of their customer base or consumer base or whatever you want to call it. And that shows a lot of initiative and that you got problem solving skills, and you were interested in generating value for them. Which is hopefully we'll get to the job. So I was like, getting your foot in the door to begin with.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, once again, that's why, we don't want the resume to just be some sort of summary of what I've done, because whoever's going to hire you has a problem they want you to solve, and they want to know you can solve it. Yes. So that's the communication you're trying to get into with them. Also, like you said, if you're already in a job, and I have seen this happen, and in fact, I've done it a bit in my own job. I didn't start out in business. I started out in liberal studies, which I loved. Great program, make your own degree. But it came a time I wanted to move to business. And I made them a value proposition. Actually, in this case, I kept making a value proposition. And I actually... This one actually boils down to a weird kind of competitive offer. The dean at the time kept saying that he'd bring me upstairs, and he wasn't doing it. And I'd had enough, and I knew they were up for AACSB accreditation, and they need somebody who was scholarly qualified to teach ethics. And at that point, the person who was doing it retired, so they didn't have anybody. I was the person they were going to put on the list for accreditation. And I told him, I says, look, I love teaching business ethics, but if you don't bring me upstairs, I'm going to teach all back in my department. You're not going to have scholarly qualified people, and you can explain that to the accreditation board. And it was credible because I'd had it. So hire me or I leave. But it was a value proposition. They needed that, still do. I love my colleagues. That dean is since gone. We're going to edit this out. But even that was a sort of internal, not just am I valuable, but I'm valuable enough that those skills are sought elsewhere. So I don't disagree with you, and it depends on your relationship with your boss. Like if you have much better relationships with your boss, it's much easier. They're much more willing to recognize the value you bring to the table, right? And that's just true. That's human nature. If they like you, they're going to want to keep you. If they see you as a hard worker, if they understand how hard it is to find good help, anything like that, they'll be much more. If you're in a more negative atmosphere, which you might want to get out of anyway, but not everybody does, far less willing to, you'll go and either you'll say you can solve the problem and they won't care, or you'll go and solve the problem and they'll say, well, thanks, I'm not going to pay for something you already did. I've seen that happen too. So you want to be careful. But you're right. The virtuous path is to bring value to the table and present your employer with that if you can solve problems. And now the choice is on them. But the choice, I am adamant about this. The choice is still on you. And you are a perfect example of this. Your career is your responsibility. Nobody else's. Not the companies to take care of, not the states to take care of. And if you've fallen into a place that you don't like, and it's not because of some awful accident or something like that, that's your fault. You want to earn more, you want a different job, you got to get out there and do just everything I said here. And if you do, actually, in my experience, you find it. Might take you a couple tries. And if you don't believe me, I was fired from my first tenure track job. So I'm not just, right, like, oh, you had it lucky. No, I found out the hard way. So anyway, but that's why I like the value proposition stuff, because, you know, Simon Sinek, find your why. Yes, that's exceedingly important, but we really cannot forget the other person in this equation in the market. They're crucial, unless you're going to go be a hermit or something. And like I said, and that's the one thing about the Fountainhead. I know that's your favorite one, but Howard Rourke it's a story of integrity and beautiful integrity. A great story, horrible story about how to have a profession, I think. Go for it. We got 10 minutes, I think.
But Rourke realizes he's not owed a job, and because there's certain terms under which he's willing to work, that's when he goes to the story, because he doesn't have enough people who see the value in what he's doing. I mean, there are also people who are acting counterproductive to him and undermining his efforts, so there's some people who are nefariously trying to distort the market to make it super difficult for him. So that's a constraint of the story. But he says, okay, well, I'll go work in the quarry because I don't want to work on other terms, and the integrity is very important.
That is.
But he's also saying, nobody owes me a job. I don't want a pity commission. So I'll go work in the quarry. And his friend Mike Donegan is like, oh, architect can't go work in the quarry. And he's like, don't feel sorry for me. I don't.
That's right.
And he totally accepts working in the quarry. But that's one piece. The other is that when he designs a home for someone, it is on his architectural principles, but at the heart of it is form follows function. He has to pay attention. He admits he needs clients. He has to pay attention to who are you about? What are you about? I need to understand my client, because form follows function.
Right.
He needs input from the client. He has to listen to who his customer is and what's important to his customer, because he designs every place uniquely in relation to its function. And the design organically emerges from that, whether it's a home with someone who's a professional journalist, like the Heller House, the library is central. In somebody else's home, something else is central, maybe the dining area, because they like to host dinner parties.
Or privacy in the wine and home.
Privacy. So he's paying deep attention to the values of his clients. Same thing with the bank, whatever the,
Oh, I don't deny any of that. It's obvious, yes.
he can't satisfy them, and they won't pay the big bucks unless he brings his integrity to what they value. So I think that it does play out, maybe not as an obvious form as you're seeking.
Well, you can, I mean, Rourke isn't trying to be like the Louis Vuitton of architecture, right? But you could say that if one wants, you want to be, I don't know, somebody with a distinctive style. I don't know why Fellini comes to mind or whatever. Or you're an artist and you have your distinctive style, right? Even if a client wanted something else and was willing to pay for it, it would dilute your brand if you did that. So I get that. I get that. But at one point, and I wish I could remember the way he phrases it though, but at one point he really says something like, what is it? I can't remember, like, I don't build to have clients, I have clients to build. Yes. So it's still very like, I want to build the way I want, and if I don't get any clients like that, then I'm not going to build. Yeah. So, okay, you're going to work in the quarry. Yeah. Realize that trade-off. That's all I want to say, is that you're going to realize that trade-off. He does. And that's why it's a beautiful, I mean, the fountain has you could feed in it, but it really is like sort of character studies, right? What happens to the man of integrity? What happens to the man of mixed Peter Keating? What happens to the man with integrity who's evil? Ellsworth Toohey, who, by the way, she has a very odd respect for in that book because he's consistent. He is very principled. He loses at the end. And then the good person, or the person of a sort of a noble character, but yet again still mixed, Gail Wynan. Somebody who could defeat Peter Keating in anything. So, I mean, yeah, it's the logical conclusions of these character studies. And Rourke has to be what he is because that's what he is. But I want to communicate to the audience that when you read The Fountainhead, and when we admire Howard Rourke, and if that's who we want to be, really who you want to be, then yeah, it's my way or the quarry. What I want to do with my life and the purpose of my life, though, is kind of a subjective thing. Maybe that's not how far I want to go.
Okay, that's cool.
I know, I understand that. I understand it.
But the thing is, Catalog accepts the consequences of it.
Yep. Oh yeah, he does the whole way. He doesn't whine about it, which is why Howard Rourke is such a great character. He doesn't even notice, like typical of her characters. He just doesn't even notice. He's just like, I want this so badly. If I can't have it, no, okay, I'll go do this. And just, but as we're talking in this room, I'm not saying that you have to. Sir, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay, no, I just saw Richard going like this, but you're shielding your eyes. And I'm like, is that because of the brightness of my genius? Or you're actually going, oh my God, you're giving me a headache. I can't interpret the signal by itself.
Leading question there. I just want to throw out that the point that you're friendly debating with Carrie Ann about clients and architects and in a business content, I think it's exactly the same dilemma people run into in business relationships.
Yeah.
Or sorry, in personal relationships. So I have high standards for who my romantic partner is going to be. Many people find themselves in a dilemma that whatever they're offering, partly because of their high standards, is not what other people are buying, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And they're not willing to lower their standards in order to have a partner. So it's like, I suppose if you were to adapt it, I'm not going to get married in order to have a wife.
Yeah. Right.
I want to have a wife in order to have a marriage. I've got this high conception of what a marriage is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
So it's Dominique or bust.
It's Dominique or bust.
Although Dominique's a psycho, but that's a different story.
Once again, what a great consistent character, and just breaks Peter Keating and Gail Wynan, though, is just not going to have that. But yeah, I think the notion of what's in important to me, what's not important to me, what am I willing to, right, give on. So to back away from relationships for a second, really, Henry Ford, it's just going to be black? What a dumb non-compromise. And the Dodge brothers are going to perform it in colors, and they're going to pick up your market. That was silly. But on other things, like, you want to use a cheaper metal for your axles? Yeah, no, no, I'm not going to compromise on that. That sounds really good. You should build this to look like a Packard. No, this is how the Ford looks. That sort of thing in integrity trade-offs. All plays in. And I think you're right. Rourke is somebody that another person that's like that in real life. You like Rush, right? Neil Peart, the drummer. Neil Peart refused to drum for any other band. Even when he was starting out, he was looking for he wanted to do a certain thing, and if he didn't find that, he was not going to drum in a band just to drum. So we can find people like that in the world. And I think objectivism teaches this as well. You make your choices based on your personal values and your rational judgment of the world, and then you accept the consequences. That's all. So anyway, that was what I wanted to talk about. Huh? There's a hand over there. Oh my God, there's a hand over there.
This is more like a layman and like a person question. So according to the Detroit example that you gave, right, out of curiosity and got this question, then I come from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I just moved in here to Illinois with my brother because paying rent there was very expensive for me, and then I am in search of jobs, and then that's the process where I had to move in with my hope. So according to the Detroit example, in the future, if I want to, really buy a house or buy a property, because I really have a lot of options because I've been moving from states to states. How would I know that buying a property, in this particular state or this particular city would be of a value proposition?
Well, that's it's a really good question. And I think it's a good question about value and living. Once I hear a faculty zipping up their bag instead of the students. No, I'm just kidding. Once again, it's going to depend on your trade-offs. So, for instance, this does apply to what you said. I'm going to make it apply. I was somewhere in Illinois with my wife. We were driving around doing something, sightseeing something. I don't know what it was. We got lost just a little bit. And I can't look at my Google Maps while I'm driving. Maybe she wasn't getting cell phone reception. We had to pull off. I'm going down this road. You can see about 4 blocks down. The building's about this big to me, but I can still see because it's very bright as a gas station on the other side. On this side of the road is pretty much an immediate turnoff that goes across 5 sets of railroad tracks, no less. There's some grain silos, there's a mechanic shop, but it's kind of pitch black except for like one overhanging light. I didn't need a light to see my phone, right? I just turned off the road and blah, 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 blah. My wife is like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm going to stop the car." She's like, "Why here? Why not go to the gas station?" I'm like, it's way down there. It's on the other side of the road. She said to me, and I believe this, as a woman, I would never do this, right? So where she felt safe to pull off on the side of the road, what was a good value proposition for her? Well-lit gas station. There is no question to her whatsoever. With me, who has not had to worry about issues of, say, violence that women face, didn't think of it. So I want to throw that out there when it comes to the location of where to live, because I lived in East Toledo for a while, and my roommate, I won't even go into this, my roommate actually used to look out the window with like a little pair of binoculars and watch the drug sales like 2 blocks down. And I kept telling him, like, don't do that, you're going to be a witness, and somebody's going to want to, but I was okay doing that for a year. Not everybody would be. So, you know, I don't know, you know, you can find inexpensive places to live. Rural America is full of them, by the way. Rural America is full of a lot of nice, inexpensive places to live. But they're inexpensive because the economic vibrancy is not that great. But it doesn't mean it's a bad town necessarily or anything like that. So if you want cheaper prices, odds are you're going to have to, or you're going to have to look for a place that really allows the housing market to adjust to demand, which there are better places and worse. So you might find places with a lot of high rises and stuff like that allow the building up. So downtown Champaign-Urbana has a lot, I mean, student housing and stuff that looks like they have a great supply. So that could be a place, or a place like of less economic vibrancy where housing is cheaper. I know out my way, at least several instances, is probably immigrants that didn't have a lot of money. They're living out there. And which makes for interesting dynamics as well, because then out in the middle of nowhere, we have a fantastic Mexican restaurant, right? Which does turn out to be economically viable because the next Mexican restaurant's in Springfield or whatever. So that's what makes the market so fun, right? Now, not if you're living in a box looking for a house, right? Then it's life or death. I get that. But this complicated dance of where you get to find your space amidst the space of everybody else in all the varieties it takes. It's just you need to remember and realize the different facets that are going, or different aspects or elements that are going into place in that. If I were a woman, right? So I didn't say this with the Detroit thing. Like once somebody pointed out a house to me in that green space and said, "Isn't that beautiful? I'd love to live there." I said, "Really? Who can hear you scream?" Exactly. You don't want to live there. That is you, right? If you read, I know it's off of Aliens, right? In space, no one can hear you scream. But it's true. Like read Jane Jacobs. Foot traffic makes for witnesses. So if you want to feel safer, you should live someplace that has a lot of foot traffic, right? So, but that's why I love this dance, because then that adds value. And actually, if you read the Death and Life of Great American Cities, and you might want to if you haven't, she talks specifically about how the economic vibrancy of a neighborhood contributes to all these other values, cultural values, safety values, and stuff like that. So that might help you think a little bit about it. It's a weird book because it's about zoning in a way, but she's a marvelous writer. So that's all I can say to you. I can talk to you a little bit more if you're like curious about specific places around here. I might be able to help, but just in general for anybody.
Isn't the book Life and Death of American Cities?
I think it's Great American Cities.
Great American Cities.
So Jane Jacobs.
Yeah, by Jane Jacobs.
Because the Portuguese version is something like Life and Death of American Cities.
It might just be American Cities. My memory can be a bit Swiss cheesy, so that's why I try to paraphrase a lot. Thank you. And I will take this off now. Have a great day. Have a great evening.